I'm Helen Kasuja. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of CIDI. CIDI is Community Integrated Development Initiatives. And today we are having a side session in commemoration of the World Water Day, but also the Uganda Water Week 2021. And today we have partnered with the Ministry of Water, Environment and Natural Resources, as we want to call it, with the Uganda Water and Sanitation Network, trying to have a side event that is specifically discussing experiences from the East African countries in as far as climate change adaptation and mitigation is concerned. So in today's session, we are trying to see how communities can be able to respond to the shocks that are caused by the water and environment shocks that happen every day in the development paradigm that we are in as East African countries. We are also joined by partners from Zambia to be able to get that perspective within the African region and as far as response to climate change is concerned.
First of all, the climate change department in the Ministry of Water and Environment is charged with the overall coordination purpose of coordinating climate change activities in the country, both at national and subnational. I'm going to talk briefly on where we started from, where we so far reached, and also a number of existing policies, strategies, and also plans that the government has come up with to combat the impacts of climate change, and also the tools that we've also developed to help in climate change mainstreaming. I'm going to talk about both what we've done in terms of mitigation and adaptation, and then, of course, our climate change action plan that we have, which is the nationally determined contribution. And then, of course, just like Cairo did, some of the best practices as a country, what we've done in terms of mitigating climate change and also adapting. And then, of course, the conclusion where some of the recommendations will come from. Yes, we all realize in the 18th century when actually industrial revolution started, with the number of activities, all these contributed to the rise of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So from then, countries realized, of course, there was temperature increase, which was mainly contributed by climate, by what the activities, the human activities that were being done, mostly in the pre-industrial, during the industrial revolution. So starting from the 90s, countries all over the world had to come up with a number of treaties, protocols that would actually help curb the increase in temperature, which are contributed by the greenhouse gases that were being emitted. So we have the UNFCCC, which is the United Framework Convention on Climate Change. We have the Kyoto Protocol, and also now we have the Paris Agreement. All these are a number of regimes that are trying to have different targets, or bring countries on board and direct them on the best way on how we can reduce the temperature, or maintain it to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So, as a country, what have we done? Of course, we are also part of this global community, and as a country, if you could see that the cabinet minutes 241, that's 2009, approved the establishment of the climate change unit in the Ministry of Water and Environment, which would help coordinate all the climate change activities in the country in regards to the existing ratified and signed those agreements.
Thank you very much, Cairo. You've really helped us to go out of this room and not only focus on the issues in Uganda, but you've given us a good overview from the IGAD region. In your keynote, you've helped to highlight what are the main causes of climate change, within the different economies, and your key highlights were that it's partly caused by precipitation or the changing temperature, and also the other cause is man-made, like we all know, and we've been hearing since Monday, during the water week.
This meeting is quite crucial to Kenya as a country, and even to us as an organization, UWASNET, simply because we are talking about the changes that are happening in the environment brought about by climate change. What is happening within the East African region is that there's either too much water or too little water, and the temperatures are rising, and you find that there's a lot of degradation that is happening in our catchment areas. There's also a lot of encroachment in our riparian zones when we talk about rivers and such like stuff. So we are here to try and find solutions to whatever is happening to environment, the changes within the climate that are affecting our water, our rivers, and everything that we need for survival. So the lessons that we are going to learn from here, we take them back to our country. But we are also making commitments as Africa at a regional level that what are we going to do as part of the CSOs, even as government, as far as climate change mitigation and adaptation is concerned.
Today is a very important day for this country as we are contributing to the Uganda Water and Environment Week, which is organized annually by the Ministry of Water and Environment. And this year, it is unique because there's lots of stakeholder involvement, but also there is interest and commitment, as can be exhibited from what has been going on within this week. Most importantly, is the issue of climate change adaptation to the stakeholders. This is a very important issue because most of our people, the communities, are very highly affected by the impacts of climate change. They are very vulnerable. For example, the women, the girls, the elderly, the disabled, and most of the communities in the rural areas are facing the impacts of climate change. For example, when the rains are too much, they are suffering from cases of floods. You find a number of settlements being displaced, people dying, animals being lost, which deprives the stakeholders of the livelihoods. In addition to that, on the other hand, there is also drought. When the drought comes, it also becomes an issue because the drought or the dry spells, for example, in Uganda, they affect the quantity of water. The levels of water are reduced. Then, in addition to that, this causes a number of impacts. For example, the animals, that's the cattle, don't have pastures, which causes these animals not to grow or not to produce the appropriate products. For example, the milk and also the meat products. So this deprives the people of their livelihood. And the discussions have centered on what actions to be made by the government, but also the stakeholders. One of them is, I'll highlight the policy issue, policy in that the government commitment to implement the policies in relation to climate change. This is very important because it guides the stakeholders how to move forward when it comes to climate change adaptation actions. Then the second one is the commitment from the stakeholders, the end users themselves, the people, the participants, where they are committed to ensure that they take on the appropriate actions For example, actions such as storing water, that's water storage, uh, enhancing of these mini irrigation schemes to be able to water their crops during the dry spells or during the drought, and also other simpler mechanisms, for example, enhancing the soil and water conservation, uh, plus uh, the day-to-day daily kind of business, for example, mulching, which assist in conservation of soil moisture, hence supporting the plant growth.
So one of the key issues that is leading us to where we are now, being conscious, um, being affected by the current climate change in the country, but not only in Uganda, just like you've been hearing from all over the world, it's a global issue, is mainly because of the lack of sensitization that is being done, that the impact of climate change is starting with me, is starting with you. This is because when you talk about climate change, many people think that it's that woman out there whom I go and pay when I'm paying for charcoal, who cuts down the tree and then they burn the trees for me to buy the charcoal. No, it starts with you. You've made a choice to buy and promote the use of polythene bags, which you later throw outside. They penetrate in the soil, and that soil can no longer, the rainwater can no longer sieve through the soil. Okay? It starts with you when you buy water packaged in a mineral bottle, and you throw it out, and it later ends up either within the rivers, within the drainage channels, and goes to Lake Victoria. Then later, it can be dissolved. It impacts on the fish. It impacts on the agroeconomy around the lakes and rivers. So, the challenge, yes, is sensitization. That everyone, everywhere, we have to know that if you burn down if you cut down the trees, if you burn the grass, you're impacting on the climate. If you use plastic and promote it, you're impacting on the climate. Secondly, as a sector, this is something we've always been talking about. As a sector, the Ministry of Water and Environment, we are one of the marginalized sectors when it comes to budget allocation. Since Sunday, many speakers, including representatives from the United Nations, have embraced that, yes, we have a big role to play to put in more funding within the sector so that the laws that are there, for instance, the president just passed a directive that wetlands should not be encroached on. But whenever we pass, you see new buildings coming up by the rich, by the poor in Bwaise. So there is need for more financing in the sector, which is currently receiving only 3% on average of the national budget. So actually that is the key starting point, that there's need for more additional financing to come to the sector so that adequate capacity is in place to monitor and see who are the encroachers on the environment that is later impacting on the climate. Then adequate technology is developed so that there is mitigation already on the communities that are impacted. If you look at the bigger part of northern and eastern Uganda, the communities that are affected by floods, those are affected by drought. There is need for so much new technology to put in place, either new innovations, but also to ensure that these communities, at least the impact on the current environment is addressed through the different initiatives that I've mentioned.